Tight and loose money policy. So, in the last lecture, I taught about how the federal government uses monetary policy to manipulate the direction our economy is going to go in. And that involves changing the cost and availability of credit to either get us to spend or save our money, depending upon the particular economic need of the time. Excuse me. So, credit has cost. Interest must be paid to obtain credit. If the cost of credit drops, then people are going to want to buy more things on credit, which will stimulate the economy. If the cost of credit increases, the demand for credit and the need to take out a loan is going to decrease. Loose money supply is monetary policy that makes credit inexpensive and abundant. And when the federal government or the Fed is trying to do with loose money supply is trying to get us to spend our money, which will expand the economy. The only problem is that you don't want to do too much expansionary policy because too much expansionary policy can cause an inflation. So loose money supply is expansionary, trying to get people to pay for or to go out and buy things, to get loans. Okay, and then you have tight money supply. Tight money supply is monetary policy that makes credit expensive and difficult to obtain. We want to do this if there's times of inflation where you want people to stop spending so much money so manufacturers won't raise the prices on products so much. It's contractionary because you're trying to cool off the economy. Okay, so inflation, when you have a period of inflation, it's caused by money being easy to borrow. People are going to buy more, businesses grow, people are employed, people spend more. And then what you're going to see is the Federal Reserve increase interest rates, sell bonds, and up the reserve requirement for banks. If we have a recession, money might be hard to borrow, people are buying less, businesses stop growing, unemployment is a result, production is reduced. So what the Federal Reserve might be forced to do is lower interest rates, buy bonds back so people have more money in their pocket to spend, and lower the reserve requirement to try to check an inflation or to try to check recession. Now, all of this budget and monetary policy makes you think, what is the best way for the government to ease any kind of economic hardships? Should the government use fiscal policy or should the government use monetary policy? What's the best choice? All right, well, the difference, of course, fiscal policy is the government spending and taxing in order to manipulate the outcome of the economy. Monetary policy is manipulating the supply of money. The pros of fiscal federalism: it's more democratic. Because the people who are writing fiscal policy and improving fiscal policy, they're actually elected. Unlike the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is not elected, so if they make a decision that the people don't like, then there's really nothing that you can do about it. The cons of fiscal policy is that it takes a long time. If you think about the budget process, it really takes a long time to get Congress to agree on a budget and to compromise, and then for the president to like it and sign off on it. And it also takes time for the federal bureaucracy to dole that money out to the appropriate places and to get that money where it's supposed to go. But once the money is appropriated, like the American Recovery and Investment Act, like the stimulus project, people are directly employed. So that is a benefit of fiscal. Pros of monetary: it's quick. It's a unilateral decision. Okay. You increase the money supply and then you let the free market operate. And it avoids all of those political entanglements. The cons to monetary policy: it's semi-undemocratic. It's unchecked. The Fed doesn't have to answer to anything. Yes, the Federal Reserve Chairman has to go in front of a congressional committee every once in a while and answer questions, but for the most part, they don't really have to worry about political entanglements whatsoever or worry about public opinion. Okay, let's look at two situations, economic situations, the Great Depression and the Great Recession that we just went through. They can be characterized by superficial prosperity. In the Roaring Twenties, it was a time of excess and wealth and credit, abundance of credit. There was a housing bubble, and there was a housing bubble about 14 years ago, where there was 14 years ago, excuse me, 7 years ago, where there was abundance of credit. People were easily able to get a mortgage, even if they couldn't afford it. So both the 1920s and the 2000s, the early 2000s, is an example of too much prosperity and a false sense of prosperity and a false sense of wealth because people were living beyond their means and borrowing money beyond their means. The stock market, okay, what you have in these periods is a stock market that was similar. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is a stock market index that measures the performance of a collection of companies. So the Dow Jones puts together some top companies and then they monitor their performance on a daily basis. If these companies are doing well, then the United States economy is considered strong. When we have bull markets, it's associated with an increase in investor confidence and an increase in investing in anticipation of future price increases. So it's like betting on who's going to win the Super Bowl, and you might spend $1,000 and you're pretty sure you're right, but what happens when you're not? What's the effect of that? Okay, in both instances, in the Great Depression and the Great Recession, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not you should allow the market to correct itself or should the government step in and actually help? Okay, so with laissez-faire, this is kind of what a more conservative take would be, is that you should let bad businesses go bankrupt and some businesses should, or the strongest businesses would rise up and they would be the ones that would be left from the economic downturn. And eventually the market would correct itself and that the government should not necessarily get involved. But in both cases, with the Great Depression and the Great Recession, we realized as the government that some businesses were too big to fail and some businesses were too important to fail. And when nobody else could help the economy recover, the government could always step in and spend money to bail out the United States economy. With the Great Recession, a piece of legislation that was very important in doing that is the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Plan. Okay, so right here, this is a political cartoon that kind of makes fun of TARP. The TARP, again, was the financial bank bailout, okay, where we use taxpayers' money to help capitalists, essentially, that were behaving badly. So when the big financial institutions went broke because of some finagling and wheeling and dealing that wasn't completely honest or legitimate or even just responsible, the federal government came in and bailed the big financial companies out. So that leads us to government and the economy. In capitalist system, we never would have had the bank bailout. We never would have had TARP. Capitalism is the belief that free markets are governed by the laws of supply and demand, not by the government implementing monetary or fiscal policy. Okay, so laissez-faire or true capitalists believe that the government should never become involved in economic issues and the government should not prevent the markets from going through its cycle. There will be natural cycles of recession. There will be natural cycles of boom. That means there's going to be natural cycles of inflation and natural cycles of recession. What we have in the United States is a mixed economy. We have a very free market system, but the government and private industries both play a role. We have private ownership of the factors of production, like the private ownership of the buildings and the machinery that are used to make things and produce things. But we still have government regulation over businesses. Okay. Also, policymakers have to maintain prosperity and economic growth while allowing the markets to operate. We have a couple of goals when we implement monetary policy. We like to check unemployment. This occurs when there aren't enough jobs for the people who are looking for jobs. It is measured by the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate or the unemployment numbers come out at the beginning of the month for the previous month. And basically, it is a survey to find out how many people who are looking for full-time employment actually have full-time employment. High or crippling unemployment occurred during the Great Depression at about 25% unemployment rate. Your unemployment rate target that you want to try to go for, um, to predict a healthy economy is between 5 and 6%. Inflation. Inflation occurs when prices rise because people are spending too much money. It is measured by the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is when economists put in 200 of commonly purchased items throughout the United States, food and non-durable goods, so things that run out on you, products that don't last. Okay, the price data is collected for a sample of goods and services, and then we measure to see how much those sample goods, the price increase from one year to the next. We don't want to see more than 2 to 3% price increase on a yearly basis. Democrats are more concerned about unemployment rates. They're worried about workers and providing a safety net for the less fortunate, those who might not have the ability to be employed. They would sacrifice inflation and they would sacrifice a budget deficit for the sake of employment. Democrats believe when nobody else can help the people, the government can always step in. Republicans, generally, if you think about what the coalition of Republicans are, they include business people that are concerned about high cost of goods and services. If the price of goods gets too expensive, then people stop buying and businesses stop making a profit. So Republicans are more concerned about inflation.